I've received questions about how to observe Sabbath throughout the years, and my answer has continued to um, evolve and build since the beginning of when we first started observing Sabbath. When we first started observing Sabbath, my kids and I, if we were together, we would like paint rocks, and we just wouldn't work. But over time, the understanding of what Sabbath is that we are supposed to be entering God's rest. And so we would listen to hymns and we would paint rocks or, do some sort of like a craft or something like that. But you can also distract yourself with tasks like that. Some people that we were assembling with, they would, play games with their family members and stuff like that. Really, what we want to be doing on Sabbath is entering God's rest. It's a time of checks and balances to make sure that during the week we have not started to reattach to the flesh. And so we want to be spending time communing with God. That doesn't mean that you can't play games with your family members or paint or, do some sort of a craft or something like that. But I would say that even playing games is taking you away from that time with God. So that if you're doing some sort of a craft or something like that, each person can be occupied with something. So for example, if you have children, especially young children, you want to be able to find activities that are going to allow you to maintain that spiritual communion with God. I'm not using the word communion as the Catholic Church or the prostitutes that bore out of her are using that. I'm talking about actually communing with God. So someone asked me this question the other day because they're taking care of a parent. And so in taking care of their parent, they need to fix meals and, do cleanup and things like that. And similarly, if you have young children, you're needing to do the same. So I'm going to share with you the response that I sent to them. And I'm going to talk with you a little bit about dancing with God. So I said, with regard to these things that you're asking about, I know that it's important to bring them to God and to sort through with Him how to address each situation. I was sharing your question with my daughter, and she and I both agree that learning how to observe Sabbath and enter God's rest is a personal, intimate ministry that we have to experience with God. I personally feel that He keeps revealing to me what He wants from me, and He disciplines me into the right posture. Now, I'm just going to kind of insert something here that I wasn't writing about. Remember that there were certain things that Jesus did on the Sabbath, and He was being accused of not keeping the Sabbath day holy. For example, Him and His apostles were eating grain in the field, and the Pharisees were rebuking them and saying, "You're not supposed to be doing that." And Jesus said, "Haven't you heard that David and his disciples had done this, and that they were not guilty?" Actually, I think it was that they had eaten the consecrated bread. He also was doing good on the Sabbath, and what the Pharisees in healing other people, and what the Pharisees were trying to do is they were trying to lock Jesus into a boxes to be checked, and they were not understanding the actual heart of God. And so Paul talks about this as well. The Sabbath still stands. Make no mistake about that. There are people who preach that the Sabbath has somehow been fulfilled, therefore abolished. I don't know what in the world they're talking about. The Sabbath still stands, period. Paul made that very clear, that there still remains a Sabbath rest for God's people. But Paul also said, don't let anyone judge you about one day being holier than another. And what Paul was addressing is not, therefore you're off the hook for observing God's holy days the way He said to observe them, or His Sabbaths the way He said to observe them, or His new moons. Paul was not saying that. But wicked people try to use that as an excuse to let themselves off the hook. These are lasting ordinances from generation to generation wherever you live. I don't know how anyone distorts that. That's pretty clear. But what Paul was saying is the same thing that Jesus was saying. Don't let people harangue you and try to put you back under the law by doing a box checked here and a box checked there. That you are accountable to God. You answer to Him. So, for example, Jesus said, if your animal fell into a pit on the Sabbath, are you not going to go and rescue your animal? That's ridiculous to think that you wouldn't rescue their animal. And so it's even more ridiculous to think that you wouldn't rescue a human being who you need to go minister to or help or heal or, whatever. It's good to do good on the Sabbath. Don't let anyone judge you for what you're doing, provided that you're, in line with God, that He's the one that you're answering to. So I went on to say I can give you some suggestions with regard to meal prep that does not require work, but there have also been times when I was caring for my grandchildren and needed to do some light prep for them. I mean, if you're a parent, you're working. There's a certain kind of work that you're doing on the Sabbath, but you should be minimizing. And if you're actually observing the Sabbath, you're going to notice that you're doing work in one form or another, but where's the line? And this is the dance that has to be sorted through with God. A single person who lives by themselves and all they're responsible for is themselves, they're going to have a different standard than a person who has a spouse and has children or has an elderly parent who they're taking care of. Okay, so it's been different when I was living alone versus when I'm staying with my kids and I'm with my grandchildren and I need to prepare something for them. But I should be planning. I shouldn't be saying, oh, well, now this is an excuse for me to cook a steak or, like to make an extravagant meal or something like that. I should be preparing in advance, and then I can do some light prep for whatever my grandchildren need. So I really like to have pre-made things like tuna for sandwiches. I can assemble the sandwich. Obviously, you don't want a day-old soggy tuna sandwich. I can assemble them easily right there. That's light prep. Pasta salads, muffins, casseroles that you can heat up, soup that you can heat up. So with light prep, there are minimal dishes. But remember, I'm not giving you boxes to check, guys. Each situation needs to be taken up with God. The main thing that you need to be doing is making sure that you're remaining in the Spirit and that you're entering God's rest. So you're doing this examination on Sabbath as to if what I'm doing is sitting down with the scriptures and I'm sitting down with God and I start getting distracted and I want to go check my social media or I want to go do this, I want to go do that. If I start getting, I don't have social media, by the way. Anyway, I have, the YouTube is it. But if I'm wanting to distract myself with something, then I need to check myself. I need to examine, why is it that I feel this compulsion to want to go distract myself? Where is it that I stepped out of bounds and out of discipline during the week that now this is happening on Sabbath? And then each Sabbath, each fast, each holy day, each new moon, you should be getting deeper and deeper into an intimate, disciplined relationship in which you are easily able to enter God's rest. If you have hindrances to entering God's rest, entering His peace, entering His presence, you're not disciplined. You're not actively working on your covenant. You can't be, because something in the sinful flesh is pulling you away from being able to do that, from being able to do the very thing you were created to do, which is to be occupied by God and in His presence and filled with His Spirit, not part of the time. Don't listen to liars who tell you that you can't live by the Spirit all the time. That's what you're designed for. They're not living by the Spirit all the time because they're not in the covenant. So these checks and balances, God says, are a sign between you and Him that you are in the covenant. It's a sign between you and Him. What is it a sign of? It's a sign that you are doing these things, that you are willing to suffer, to circumcise from the flesh, examine yourself, repent, and continue to correct yourself into the posture that He requires. Now, you're not going to be able to know what is required of you unless you go and relate with Him. That's by design. You're not going to know. No one, including myself, is going to be able to give you a checklist of do's and don'ts that's going to suffice. And God rebukes us in Isaiah for treating His covenant like a rule for this and a rule for that, a little here, a little there. Remember that He rebukes us for that. So you can't be treating Him like that. You can't be in your heart thinking, oh, I need the rule book. you need to be thinking, okay, what is God's heart? And asking him and rending your heart to what he's revealing to you. Okay, so that said, you have to do some sort of prep. Surely you've got to take the food out of your refrigerator and do something to your food, but then where's the line? Okay, so I've talked about this before, where I've crossed that line. And sometimes that line's a very thin line between what he's allowing me personally and what he is deeming being too much. This needs to be worked out with him. Everything in your covenant needs to be worked out with him. So let me finish reading what I wrote, and we'll talk about that dance. One of the other things that he had asked me about had to do with working out on the Sabbath. He's made some lifestyle changes in the covenant, some corrections to his lifestyle. And so, when people are making corrections to their lifestyle, they might be, cutting certain things out. Maybe they stopped smoking, stopped drinking, stuff like that. And so, living a healthy lifestyle and transitioning to that, you get scared of taking a day off because you might get out of the habit. So you got to work this through with God. But here's what I would personally, what I have worked out with God. I don't personally feel okay with, and I did this for many, many years. I was, into body sculpting and body sculpting shows, and was, into different physical activities, whether it was kickboxing or gymnastics, etc. So here's the thing. The culture of working out in a gym or doing these sorts of things usually goes along with secular music that speeds you up in your flesh. I'm not comfortable with that anymore. That takes me away and into the flesh. It takes me away from God. Pushing my body like that takes me away from God. So, and I don't mean pushing my body in terms of like taking a walk or pushing my body as far as moderate physical training, but really pushing my body to where I was like lifting weights and, doing high cardio activity. I don't believe in that. So I definitely don't feel comfortable doing a workout like that on Sabbath, for sure. If I don't feel comfortable doing it any other day, I'm not going to feel comfortable doing it on Sabbath. But certainly on Sabbath, I would not do something like that. But I do feel comfortable taking a walk. I do feel comfortable doing some sort of physical activity like that. And I have to take my dogs for a walk anyway. Now, let me explain it a little bit. Let me explain this a little bit, since I'm already bringing it up. Do you think that Paul and the apostles and Jesus, they were like, oh, I got to get in my gym time or something like that? People were working the land. Like, they were working the land. They were working their homes. Prophets were walking from town to town, earning their bread. Like, do you think that this is the lifestyle that people were living? You pay someone to go work in your yard, but then you go to the gym. Like, how does that even make sense? Just work in your yard. I did it for years because that's what the world teaches you, but it's like busy work all the time. They just want to keep you busy, Work in your yard. Work the land. That's physical activity. Not only is it physical activity, but you are doing something that is going to enable you to be able to understand the metaphors that God has that he has used in order for you to understand spiritual things. So Paul says physical training is of some benefit, but righteousness has benefit for all things. Why not just do what God established? And then you're also going to be productive, right? So or productive in other ways apart from, just your physical training. The other thing I want to make mention of is that my experience with weight regulation is that it does not consist in the workout and the dietary rules of this world. So eat moderate, don't make food an idol or a distraction. If you're overindulging in any particular thing, you need to examine what you're doing. Why are you doing that? And on work days, do work that's reasonably active. Maintaining an active and healthy lifestyle doesn't mean that we're always on the lookout for some sort of workout. Like, oh, I need to become a rock climber. I need to become a kickboxer. I need to do this and I need to do that. And that needs to be my entire day. That's a day of distraction. That's what that is. Don't be idle. Get out and do the things that God established for us to do, like work the land, clean your house, And these things are going to keep you healthy, moderate, even keel, connected to God, rather than the world's way, which is to bring us into the flesh through secular music and overworking our bodies. Also remember that Daniel and his friends were in better shape for eating vegetables and actually obeying God than those who were eating the royal food. Do you not think that it would be God's goal and objective for you to be physically healthy when you're obeying him? Of course it is. Now, and for those of you who have quitting smoking is one of the hardest things I ever did. So being an ex-smoker myself, it was a trap to think that I needed to go from one flesh-feeding behavior to another, because it ends up keeping you, quote unquote, addicted to being activated in your flesh and something constantly stimulating you or bringing you down. Like, I need this in order to bring me up. I need that in order to bring me down. That is a trap. And people can use exercise that way. And I used exercise that way, like a drug. You need to be very careful about things that bring you too high or things that bring you too low, because you should stay even keel in God. And if you're living by the Spirit, you're going to stay even keel. You're going to be in that spirit of self-control. So all of this to say, focus on entering God's rest and being in the Spirit. That is going to keep the devil from accessing you through your flesh and trying to trigger you into reattaching to the sinful flesh, whether that has to do with smoking or not eating right or any other kind of distraction behavior that's going to take you away from God. Now, with regard to dancing with God, as you are obeying his Sabbaths, you're not going to do it perfectly from the beginning. I just want you to know that. You need to know what his heart is, and that's what you pursue. So, am I in accordance with you? Am I in agreement with you? And is it okay for me to do this? And he's going to let you know. And so you're doing this dance, and as you're doing certain things, you're feeling his conviction or his confirmation that you're doing things correctly. If you focus on entering his rest and being in his peace and communing with him, and doing this on a daily basis, by the way, because Jesus told us that we're supposed to be praying for our daily bread on a daily basis. That's the implication in daily bread. Daily bread does not have to do with make sure that we're eating every day. It has to do with spiritual food. Jesus is the bread of life. And so if you're feasting on him, you're receiving your daily ministry. You see what I'm saying? So if you're doing this on a daily basis, then you're increasing your diligence to it on Sabbath. So that if there's any kind of distraction that the devil is trying to trigger in your flesh, then you go back and you say, okay, where was I undisciplined this week? Or why is this happening? What is it that I did? What did I succumb to that has allowed the devil this chink in my armor? The dance with God means that on a daily basis, you have a relationship with him, and you've already been learning from him and learning what it's like to hear from him and to be in him, so that when it comes time for you to be discerning things and asking him, is this okay to do and is this not, you're going to feel from him. Now, I want you to think about how it is to dance, okay? I'm not talking about freestyle dance. I'm talking about maybe more of a ballroom dance or something like that, like a partner dance. When you are doing a partner dance, you can feel from the man as he's leading you. He's going to maybe, he might press on your back. He might press on your hand or pull your hand. And so if he's pulling your hand, you know to step forward. If he's pushing your hand, you know to step back. If he's pulling you through, you might be ready to do a spin. And when you're first learning a dance like that, it takes a minute to figure out, what do these different cues mean? And it's the same thing with God. He's going to convict you. He's going to confirm with you. If you feel fear, you know that you're stepping away from him and that you need to return to him and ask him, why is it that I'm having this feeling? Or maybe you know why you're having that feeling and you go sort it through with him. So there's a dance that you're doing as you're relating with him and you're developing this relationship. The same thing happens in relationships. You learn another person's cue as to when they're annoyed with something, they're pleased with you, etc. And in order to have a relationship with God, we need to become accustomed to his cues. We need to become attuned to his cues. And then we need to obey. So all in all, the most important thing is that you are going back to him and you're sorting through, in my situation, is this okay? How do you want me to live? So that's the reason I'm answering you in the way that I'm answering you with you. I'm telling you my testimony, but I'm not giving you boxes to be checked, because that, quite frankly, is not going to lead to having a relationship with God. Please discern this with him.